Hi everyone, this is Pierrick from P2design. After a long break taking care of my new home and searching for inspiration, I decided to dive into the fighting game Sprite exercise. It was introduced on Twitter by Michael Quivers, a seasoned principal animator in several famous studios and also an instructor at INMA. Sagat is my favorite character from the Street Fighter franchise, so I naturally chose him and his super iconic ultra move, the Tiger Genocide. In this video, we'll go through the animation process and how I created those hand-drawn VFX using Blender's grease pencil. Let's kick in. Tiger! The first step is to find reference. I use this website at first, fightersgeneration.com, where you can find tons of sprites taken from hundreds of fighting games. I also simply searched on YouTube and isolated this animation from Street Fighter Alpha 3. From there, I isolated each frame or sprite using Windows Capture Tool, and then prepared my 3D scene. I started by opening my Trident character rig provided with my animation course Alive. The animation will be done as in a 2D fighting game. I will make my character move along the global X-axis. First, create a new collection called Set or Camera. Add a camera, give it a 70 to 80 mm focal length so that there is not much distortion. The higher the focal length, the most orthographic your view will look like. The camera may not be rotated, but along its x-axis by 90 degrees. I set its 8 to 1.35 meters, so that it's aligned with the character chest, and moved it about 12 meters away from the character. These values may change based on the character you're using. I will open the timeline and push it down, and since I'm trying to make a 2D sprite, it's super important to focus on what the camera sees. To make it more comfortable, make sure you give your background a nice contrasting color compared to your character. I do like to use textured character with flat shading, activating shadows and cavity. All of this will help you better read the silhouette of your character. This is critical for this exercise. I will also increase the passepartout opacity of the camera so that I can focus on what the camera sees. I've created another window where I will open my reference, and I just make sure it's close to my camera view so that I can compare both easily. We are now ready to animate. Tiger! The whole animation process, without the VFX, took me 5 hours and 10 minutes to achieve. This is a fantastic exercise, because it doesn't take too long and you don't need any inspiration. Just pick a sprite animation you enjoy and go for it. If you'd like me to create other animation like this one, just let me know in the comments below. I started the animation with the idle pose, or the default pose of your character when it's not moving. I'm animating mostly from the front view, which is pretty close to what we see through the camera, and as explained before, I will try to match the reference with what I see through the camera view. I used inverse kinematics for the leg and forward kinematics for the arms. Here are some key features that you need to double check whenever you are posing your character from reference. First, make sure that your knees are pointing the same direction or almost the same direction as the feet. Double check the position of the center of gravity of your character, also known as COG or COG. This will set the balance of the character, so it's super important. Then try to identify the main shape of the spine. In this case, a nice C shape. Then make sure you pose the shoulders. Most of the beginners never touch the shoulder controller, and that's a big mistake. Make sure the elbows shows in the silhouette and watch out for the position of the hands. Double check if you should see both eyes of the character. Good posing is critical for your animation. The art of posing is one of the chapters from my Blender animation course Alive. It's the most extensive Blender animation course released to date, and it's top rated. Check it out on P2designacademy.com. When posing your character rig, remember that it might not have the same proportion as the reference. This is why it's important to study the reference as we did just before. Don't forget you're working in 3D. The most important thing is what we will see through the camera. I haven't applied this rule the whole animation, but you should check your poses from all angles, making sure your character is balanced. This will improve your animation skill for sure, but also you should reach more accurate poses with ease. Let's call this first pose done. What I will do now is duplicate all my keys and move them on frame 5. I don't care about the timing at the moment, and this is going to be our starting point for the next pose. By keying all the controllers during the blocking stage, I prevent sliding controllers when we will switch to spline. Here are some tips when working on your blocking. First of all, we don't care about the timing. Just block your pose every 5 frames, and then you will offset those poses in time to fit your animation. To make sure you properly set up your step mode, make sure you only enable Show Hidden. This way you will see all your keys. But I also advise you to go in the graph editor, also Show Hidden only, and press Alt-H to make sure that you don't have an animation curve that is hidden. You wouldn't be able to unhide them in the dope sheet. Then you can switch back to the dope sheet, select everything, press T and switch to constant interpolation. This way you won't miss any controller and your blocking will be nice and clean. The good thing about this exercise is that all the key poses are picked for you. This is another reason why this exercise is super cool whenever you lack inspiration. It's a bit like sketching from photo reference. You just try to match what you see. In this example, I will match the idle pose, then the channeling pose, this weird knee pose, see that there is no anticipation to fit game requirement, the pushing pose, the hit pose, etc. Your goal is to make sure that you features iconic poses. I played Street Fighter a little bit, and I do remember those specific poses from Sagat. So I will do my best to feature them in the animation and make sure we read them. Follow the rules of great posing during the process. Pay attention to the line of action, the posing of the fingers, and try to prevent tangency between the features of the character's body. Once your poses are built, just try to match the timing of the reference. When watching the blocking, it's hard for us to understand how our character is moving in space. That will be great to create a background and make the first and last frame match. The only important thing regarding the camera is the starting point and the end point. The way you animate it in between doesn't matter. To match your character position, just select one of its controllers, for example the torso or the feet, and copy its X location value at the beginning of the animation, but also at the end. With these values and Windows Calculator, or you can use Blender too, you should be able to calculate the distance covered by your character during his animation. If I now check the initial position of my camera and I add the value we just calculated and use it as its final X position, our camera and character position on first and last frame will perfectly fit. For the columns, I used a simple stretched cube and added to it an array modifier. Even though it wasn't the main purpose, for composition's sake, I tried to symmetrize my columned position. To match first and last frame, I must say I did it a bit the sloppy way. I zoomed a lot on my character and find a point of reference. On the foot, for example, here the ankle is perfect. Go to the final pose and then I adjust the factor value of the array so that it matches more or less the same position. I believe it matches with maybe 1 pixel of threshold. The ground and background are pretty simple. It's a single mesh, a simple plane. I just extruded one of the edges and then beveled it with several cuts. From there you can go back in object mode, right click on it and shade it smooth. Then I just scaled it to match my scene. The material setup is super simple. It's a principal BSDF with a pretty high roughness value. And for the color, it's a checker texture mixed with a gradient texture. This way I can have the background fading into infinity. Here is the whole node setup if you want to reproduce it. To make it match on first and last frame, I use the same method as for the columns, just playing with the scale and compare first and last frame. Super sloppy, but it works. The camera work was pretty simple since I had to work only on 2 channels. To make it look natural, just make sure that you don't anticipate your character motion. The camera starts to pan a little after the character started to move, and it's settled after the character. I use a pretty strong easing so that we feel weight in the camera. The X rotation channel allowed me to track the character in the air. Again, the camera is slightly delayed compared to the character, so it's fine to have him out of frame for a couple of frames. But when he lands, it's important to frame the foot, because it's an important visual landmark. The goal of this exercise and its complexity is to make you work the in-betweens. The sprite animation has its limitation. It has very few frames, so we need to know what happened in between. And this is the moment you can make creative choices. How do I get from this idle pose to this channeling pose? Here is my version of those poses, and the two poses I built in between to show the character gathering energy. The idea is to fill those blank areas with some details that won't change the nature or the feeling of the animation. Then I created a moving hole for the channeling section of the animation. We do recognize the original pose, but I'm pushing it further. I'm pushing the head down, the shoulders up, and I'm filling the lungs. One of the trickiest parts of the animation is the moment he switches from the channeling pose to the knee pose. There is absolutely no in-between. So my idea was to transition from the channeling pose to a quick anticipation or micro-anticipation and then throw the knee. All of this achieved through few poses. So to keep it smooth, I had to use a lot of smears. When you know that you will have a super contrasted posing in very few frames or in a very short timing, this is where you should block on once and create your smears. Basically, it's like you're polishing your animation during the blocking stage. It doesn't mean you won't rework it in Spline, but what you should understand is that using the graph editor won't help you guess the motion. So you basically have to craft each poses frame by frame. Once you feel the whole animation reads well without splining, you can switch to Spline. And this is what my animation looked like before I jumped into Spline. I won't be covering polishing here because aside from a few smears, it's not super interesting. Most of the heavy lifting was done during the blocking stage. But don't worry, I will soon publish the full animation process. Here is the polished animation. Another post on Twitter that inspired me to do this exercise was this incredible collaboration between Raul Ibarra, aka Croissant, and Raffles. Croissant did this awesome 3D animation, and Raffles the hand-drawn VFX. They ended up with this killer result. Let's say that the process is a little longer than animating in 3D. It took me 14 hours to get to this result. Now I understand that I'm still learning. I've been practicing this for about a year now, and I guess a professional could achieve this within 6 to 8 hours, I guess. This is really something I love. I want to be good at this to at some point be able to do some kind of arcane style animation. But for the time being, here I am creating a new collection where I will store all the grease pencil objects. I will add a new grease pencil, a blank one. I've positioned the grease pencil object between the camera and my character, so that whatever I will draw will be on top of the character. Since I wasn't planning to modify the camera, it's totally okay to paint from view or to project your grease pencil from view. But from this experience, I would suggest to use front projection, for example. This way, all your strokes will be aligned on the same plane, and it's a little easier to manage later on. While it will be physically possible to do it with a mouse, you do need a tablet to use grease pencil. When I'm making VFX, I don't use the strength variation nor the radius variation. It's mostly a line work. For me, lighting VFX are the less complicated ones to achieve. I always start with a simple line. I try to get different curve size, big, medium and small, and find a good rhythm. And at first, I won't give any thickness to my lightning design. I will simply draw a line and I will draw it on once, meaning that I will draw on every frame. The technique to get a convincing lightning is to animate a shape over 2 to 3 frames, and you animate it or you make it evolve over those few frames. Then you totally change the shape and the orientation of the lightning. And you change the number of frames this new line will take to evolve. So if you did the first line evolving on 2 or 3 frames, maybe this new line may change over only 1 frame. It will just blink and then you draw another shape. And then you just combine different rhythm. For example, 2 frames and 2 frames and then 1 frame and then 3 frames, etc. etc. If we have a look at the final result, my first line evolved over 2 drawings, the second line over 2 drawings, the third over 1 drawing, the fourth over 3 drawings and 3 additional frames to dissolve. And as the channeling gets stronger, I'm just adding more lightning one on top of the other, but I'm applying the same rule. Here you can see me drawing the dissolve effect. So basically you take the most extreme part of the lightning, you push them away with some easing, and you make your stroke or the shape smaller and smaller until it totally disappears. This really helps reading your shape and give a smooth transition to a very fast animated VFX. Once I'm done animating this simple stroke design, I will simply go over each frame and try to give some thickness to my lightning. Later on, I will fill those shapes using the filling tool. But as I spent a lot of hours working on this project, I kind of polished my method. It's better to use auto merging tool whenever you're drawing, and then you can toggle on and off filling on the material slot. This way you can animate using your line work, and you can double check the silhouette of your drawing using the fill option. I switched when I was working on the third dragon punch. I would have probably saved a couple of hours if I have guessed this before. To animate the dust puff, I animated the first 3 drawings on once because it's very fast. The faster the dust is, the sharpest will be the shapes. So the first 2 frames are very spiky, and as it damped or slowed down, it gets rounder and rounder. When the dust is dissolving, it's not moving super fast, so I animated it on 2s. I first animated the main silhouette, and then on top of it, I drawn the shadows that are masked by the main silhouette. The same design is repeated 3 times during the animation, and I made a little landing effect with the same method and materials. Animating fire was a real challenge. It's complicated to design, it's complicated to animate, so I won't go any deeper about this. But I will also publish the full drawing process and the full VFX creation process in the time-lapse. Now there is one thing I'd like to highlight. I meticulously drawn the flames so that they look like a tiger head. This is why you may have spotted a tiger reference during this video. Another touch I'm pretty proud of too are those little trays whenever the character is falling down. His feet are colliding with some flames and it creates those trays. This was the most challenging VFX animation I did so far in 2D. It was frustrating, it was very hard, but I'm pretty proud of the result. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you very soon in another video.